particularly among men, there's this desire to be tough, not to be able to admit that you're struggling, not to be able to seek help. My brother had a very serious skiing accident and a very serious head injury. He was in a coma for over a month. That's when he took his own life. I saw Muhammad Ali standing there, and three guys who were supposed to be fucking experts. The whole thing needs to be fucking torn down. Everybody should have to do business with everybody.
Yes, guys, what's going on? So, today we are joined by a Harvard law graduate, a movie producer, an ex-HBO sports executive, a Hall of Fame boxing promoter, and a lot of you will know him from promoting Rocky Balboa versus Mason the Lion Dixon. We are joined by Brooklyn's finest, Lou Dibella. Lou, thank you for joining us today. How you doing?
Good, Sham. Good to be with you.
Okay, so firstly, I want to ask you, you're from Brooklyn, and you got the likes of Mike Tyson, Barbara Streisand, Chris Rock, Spike Lee, Larry King. It goes on and on and on and on. What is it in that water over there that you guys were drinking that led you to this success that you all seem to have?
I don't know, man. I think, like, they say, if New York, New York, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere. If you can make it in Brooklyn, you can make it anywhere. And I think that, look, Brooklyn was a real melting pot of Brooklyn was. I grew up in Brooklyn. I lived there till my parents moved out of Brooklyn when I left for college, but my whole childhood was in Brooklyn. It was a very diverse sort of melting pot of a place. At one point, people used to, there were statistics years ago. I don't think they're true any longer, but they used to say that at some point, one out of every nine people in America could trace their roots back to Brooklyn. Um, Brooklyn during the period of time where there was, people were coming from all over the world, and America was opening its doors to people instead of closing them. Um, a lot of people settled in Brooklyn. I think Brooklyn is a real interesting sort of diverse place. And if people come to New York, take that trip on the train or on an Uber and go to Brooklyn. You'll know why then, Sham.
It's interesting. It's interesting that is because I'm sort of what I'm trying to dig at here is what led you to your success, and if there's a common theme that was taking place that led the likes of Iron Mike Tyson, you had Chris Rock, Spike Lee. What was it that
I,
really
I think
sparked that?
different. I think different things led different people. I mean, Tyson's experience was more a traditional sort of fighter's experience, and a traditional fighter's experience more particularly in big cities and in the United States and most of the world, frankly, because rich kids don't box. Sham. Rich kids don't fight for the most part. I mean, and it's not now in this generation. Maybe you see some people that have had more advantaged backgrounds, but for the most part, it's poor kids that fight. People fight their way out of things. Mike Tyson became a fighter because Mike Tyson had a really rough upbringing, and Mike Tyson basically probably would have died on the streets if not, you know, gotten under the wing of Customato and gotten into a boxing gym. Um, my experience was sort of different. I was a grandson of Italian immigrants. My parents were first generation. I was raised with a big emphasis on being highly educated and well educated. Um, I think my success stems from the fact I was very dedicated to doing what I liked. Like I think that I always knew I wanted to be in the sports and entertainment worlds. I knew from the time I was a kid. I went to Harvard Law School because I got in, not really because I ever wanted to be a lawyer, but I think I was astute enough to understand that a Harvard law degree would help me in whatever I was going to do. But my desire from the time I was a young child was to be like I knew I couldn't sing, I couldn't be a rock star. I knew I wasn't going to be a great athlete. I mean, I was an okay athlete, but never had the ability to be a professional athlete. But I loved sports and I loved music, movies, entertainment, and I always wanted to be in that world. And I was going to work as hard as I could to get there. And I think that never giving up, working really hard, being directed toward makes you happy. Um, that's the way to succeed. I think a lot of the people you mentioned, I can't speak to what Chris Rock or look. Brooklyn's a funny place. I tend to think certain places probably are better food for comedy than others. So like you're a New York City guy, you probably have more to comment on. You're in the middle of the world, you're in the center of the world, and Brooklyn is. particularly Chris and Rock and those guys are more my age. They're not young guys, but I think their experiences growing up there probably gave them a lot of food for meeting all sorts of people in different, diverse kind of characters. I don't know what leads a comedian to be a comedian. I think it's different things that drive people to go where they're going. I don't know if it was so much Brooklyn, though. I think I'm glad I grew up in Brooklyn. I grew up in an age where people actually played sports in the street instead of video games, and my neighborhood was like was every type of person, every religion, every ethnicity. I grew up with all sorts of different cultures around me. Um, I'm happy that I grew up in that kind of area instead of more of a suburban upper. I grew up in an area where you met people of all income classes. You met people who were poor. You met people who weren't. You met people who were black, white, Jewish, Arab. The diversity in Brooklyn's sort of extraordinary, and it still is, which to me makes it a great place to live because I don't want to live in a homogenous world. I don't want to live in a homogenous, city or suburb. I want to see different things and be exposed to different people and different cultures and different ways of thinking. Not everything is left versus right. Not everything is black versus white. Not everything is and right now we're a divided land. There's not a lot of unity in this country, and there's an inability for people to even communicate, debate, share ideas, and talk civilly and with understanding of other people's right to think differently. And it's got to change, or I'm afraid that things are going to get worse here.
Let's talk about your journey into boxing. What got you into boxing? How?
I mean, I didn't stumble on boxing because, as I mentioned earlier, my grandparents were Italian immigrants, right? And my grandfathers, when they got over here, they adopted baseball as their sport. Both of them learned about learned the rules of baseball and became baseball fans. But really, the sports that they loved as kids were boxing and football, soccer, right? What you guys call football, in America we call soccer. There wasn't a lot of Italian soccer or European soccer that was being televised here. There was none. Boxing was the sport that they related to because it was the sport that they grew up with. So when I was 5, 6 years old, I started watching, boxing on the tube with my grandfathers, and my dad wasn't a big boxing fan, but my grandfathers watched it. That's how I started watching.
Who were
Uh,
you watching in them days, Lou? Who was fighting around in that
well,
era? What
there
year
was
was it?
an Italian middleweight champion when I was a little kid. When I was I was 5, 6, 7 years old, and Nino Benvenuti, who's still alive, a great gentleman, a Hall of Famer, and still a commentator in Italy. But Nino was middleweight champion of the world, and my grandparents used to follow his career, and um, and I became a fan. And because I watched Nino Benvenuti and I watched boxing on uh, American TV, I got exposed as a very little kid. I mean, literally a very little kid, to Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, and I was immediately fell in love with the guy. I was mesmerized. Here
Lou,
was
can I pause you for a second, please, if you don't
sure
mind?
no.
Since you mentioned Muhammad Ali, I actually heard a story that you once told that Muhammad Ali was handing pamphlets out outside of another boxing match that was taking place. Could you retell that story for our viewers?
I worked at HBO for 10 years. I sort of ran boxing for HBO Sports, um, and it was in Midtown Manhattan near the theater district was where our offices were, and I was going to see a Broadway play after work. So I left my office and I walked, a few blocks away to go to the theater, and I saw a big group of people gathered in front of about a block away from me. A large group gathered in front of one of the theaters, one of the Broadway theaters. As I got closer, um, I saw Muhammad Ali standing there signing pamphlets, and he was signing pamphlets, understanding Islam, or he was signing pamphlets that were designed for people that weren't Muslim to understand the Islamic, religion. And I still have some of these pamphlets, by the way, signed by him in my house. Um, but he was signing these pamphlets. It was about 7 p.m. because all the Broadway plays were about to start at that time.
Yeah.
And I saw him sign the pamphlets. I said hello. Um, you know, we had a little conversation, and then I went on to my play. And I left the play. It was 10 p.m. 3 hours later, and I leave the play, and I look down the block, and there's still a big crowd of people. And there is Muhammad, and he's continuing to sign these pamphlets for people that are continuing to line up, to meet him and to you know to get one of these little autograph pamphlets. So, like, Muhammad, you've been here for what, 4 hours, 5 hours? I said, what are you doing? And he said, Lou, um, I want to go to heaven. I want to go to heaven, and I want to please God, and that's why I'm standing here. And I was like, wow, the most famous, recognizable athlete in the world. You know, um, Ali always recognized he didn't live a perfect life. And one of the things that Ali wanted to do, particularly interestingly, when he got older and even when he was ill, he had a tremendous desire to make impact on people and to be a positive sort of force. And that was one of the driving things I saw in him, and I had the pleasure of knowing Ali and his family. Um, but particularly later in his life, the desire to make amends for the mistakes he had made and to be a good human being and a better person and to serve Allah was a driving force for him. You know, I always believed, like, out of the things I've done in my life, um, I picked the right sports hero. Like, Ali was my sports hero, and once I actually had the opportunity, because I became someone in boxing, to get to know him and meet him and spend time around him, and I was always grateful that I picked the right sports hero.
Lou, I don't want to dive too much into the technicalities of boxing because I can sit here and we can talk about it, and I'm sure you could as well. We could really dive into it, but I'm curious about your opinion. Obviously, you are a legendary boxing promoter, so you know your boxing very well. I put Muhammad Ali as number one pound for pound of all time, even ahead of the great Sugar Ray Robinson. And the reason for that is not because I think he was technically more astute than Ray Robinson, but I believe he had notable wins on his record which outclass anybody in the history of the sport. And I think his will to win and his heart and his determination, his perseverance, and obviously he did have natural ability with his speed, agility, and he had a good pop in his punch. Do you believe that Muhammad Ali was, number one or number two or number three? Where do you put him on the list of the all-time greats?
You know, who was a better artist, Van Gogh or Picasso? It's like, when you get that great, who's better? It's my opinion versus yours. It's a conversation over a couple of cocktails. You know, I put Ali. Ali was the greatest heavyweight who ever lived. One of the greatest athletes who ever lived. The most, in my mind, the most socially significant athlete of the last century. Um, I have him number two on my list. And part of the reason, by the way, I have Sugar Ray Robinson number one and Ali number two is because Ali told me that Robinson was the greatest fighter who ever lived. I mean, literally, you know. Um, so I'm accepting his word and also what I see on tape. And Ali, Robinson's style, Robinson's whole way of fighting was way ahead of his time. But you know what? Who was greater, Ali or Sugar Ray Robinson? I can't answer that. I 1-2, 2-1. Who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter. You're talking about a level of greatness that is really the top of the mountain. And I'm not going to argue with you. I think that your opinion is completely justifiable to say Ali is the greatest fighter who ever lived. I'll put him number two, and I'll just say he's the greatest heavyweight who ever lived.
So let's touch a little bit since we're talking about great fighters, Ray Robinson. You could talk about Ali. We can go down to Duran and Ray Leonard, so on and so forth. Now, in today's era, our modern greats were Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather. We now see the emergence of Terence Crawford. You've seen Errol Spence, and there's
I
some
don't. I
great
don't put
fighters now.
these guys anywhere near. Yeah, these are the best pound for pound fighters right now. Usyk, and my list number one is Usyk. Personally, right now I would say Usyk is the number one pound for pound fighter until proven otherwise. Only because what he's done at numerous weight classes, the dominance I think he's a great fighter, and I happen to have him number one right now. But when you look in general at our quote unquote top 10 pound for pound of today, um, it's a different. Fighters don't fight each other. The best don't
I
fight,
know what you mean. I know what you mean.
and not only that, they fight so infrequently. You know, one of the, Ray Robinson would lose to a great fighter and then fight him 4 weeks later and beat him. I mean, there were years where Ray Robinson had 20 fights. When you look through our top 10 pound for pound, half the top pound for pound list hasn't fought in over a year. I mean, I got to be. I mean, do I want to see? I read something yesterday that Usyk listed the 3 fights that he most want to see, and they, actually they sort of align with mine. You know, but I give a couple of illustrations. I don't want to go through the whole list, but Crawford and Spence. Okay, I've been wanting to see Crawford and Spence for years. I'm almost getting bored and tired of waiting for it to the point that I don't care that much anymore. And neither one of those guys is fighting. They're not in the public eye regularly. They're not out there. They're not beating other people. They're basically sitting around, not doing much, or winning fights. When Crawford fought his last fight, it was a complete mismatch. We're not getting the biggest and best fights, and you can't compare this generation top 10 pound for pound, no matter how great their talent is. You can't compare their careers to the guys that fought everyone, fought regularly, fought with frequency in generations previous.
So Lou,
No,
this brings us nicely onto this area which I want to focus on, which is the decline of boxing, because I really do believe, like I've all my life pretty much I've been a boxing man. My brother, my family, my dad, we've all been into boxing, and it's very sad that we now see this decline taking place in boxing. But obviously, boxing goes through peaks and troughs over the years. Yeah, you have an up period and a down period, but we are definitely seeing, in my opinion, the decline. And as you see,
yeah,
Fury, Joshua Wilder, the draws. Yeah, go on.
it's there. You're right. You're seeing a decline that's been some. I mean, there are ebbs and flows. It goes like this. It goes up and down. But if you're looking at the longer pattern, it's sort of like going like it's just go. You know, if you're looking, you might have the jumps in the middle, but there is a decline. Why? The sport is too fractured. The concept of having exclusive sort of avenues where fighters, first of all, we have 4 major ratings organizations, and additional ones also. There are, and those organizations, they have too many weight classes, too many champions, too many quasi champions. What is an interim champion? How do you have a regular champion, an interim champion, and they're both continuing to fight other people? There are too many. We're fractured with respect to the governance of the sport. We're fractured with respect to how the media handles the sport. Could you imagine? Look at Premier League. Could you imagine if Man City could never play Man U because they had deals with 2 separate distribution mechanisms, or 2 separate platforms, or 2 separate networks? It's ridiculous. We continue to weaken our product, and also it's not. Yeah, there's a decline, but the most overriding issue is, and it's existed frankly for generations, is that boxing's model is broken. The business model, the sports model for boxing is broken, and it needs to be repaired. I mean, how many times, you're a fan? You said your brother, your dad, you were raised as a boxing fan, right? So you watch fights. Aren't you amazed by how many fights you see where it's incredibly clear who won the fight, and 3 guys who are supposed to be fucking experts get it completely wrong? I could put 3 honest little 6-year-old school children around a ring and let them watch a fight from those judges' seats and say at the end of the fight to them, "Hey kids, which man or woman won that fight?" And I would trust that result more than 3 professional experts judging a fight. Because the system that governs how judges are selected, how judges are paid, who the judges are, it's co-opted and politicized. And I don't believe there's criminality for the most part, though I'm sure there has been and continues to be a little bit. But I do know that there were all sorts of incentives for bias, for institutional bias. You know, the champion, the person that generates all the money, there's a system that protects that person. The A side, we call it in boxing. That's a term of art. You know that term, and I'm sure people that listen and watch your podcast know that term also. The A side. We have a system that's totally designed to protect the A side, to protect the economic stream. I'm not saying that every sport's perfect, that we're the only imperfect sport, but we are the most lawless. We are the most ruleless. We are the one that has the fewest barriers to entry. Any charlatan could come in tomorrow and be a promoter or a manager. In this day and age, if you have a lot of if you have a lot of followers on TikTok or whatever the hell it is, or you know you're a big Instagram person or you have a big YouTube following, and you feel like putting on gloves, you can call yourself a fighter and get paid. Now, by the way, people are entitled to watch what they want to watch. I don't hate on anything. You know, if you want to watch that nonsense, God bless you. If you're entertained by it, you know, people are entertained by a lot of stuff I don't like, right? But we have so weakened boxing as a real powerful sport, as an international um, credible sport. We have weakened our product. We have we are not delivering the events that transcend just hardcore boxing fans. We've lost a lot of our casual base, and that's not just in America, that's worldwide. Um, we've been our own worst enemy, and we've opened the doors to all sorts of other forms of boxing that I question whether you'd even call them boxing. But you know, we've opened the doors for guys putting on gloves or raising their hands and throwing them for money. Partially because we don't do a good enough job making our sport believable and marketing it effectively and offering the people that care about it the content they want the most. You know, the best fight in the heavyweight division to make for a decade, almost a decade, has been Wilder and and uh, and Joshua, and that was the case when they were both undefeated. So what have we done? Fight never happened. Fight never happened because of greed, avarice, competing platforms and TV networks. Rationality dictated that fight should have happened when they were both undefeated, and DAZN was throwing around insane money in the beginning to try to make the biggest events, and we still couldn't make it. Spence and Crawford, with all respect to them, no one knows who the fuck they are. If Errol Spence walked in Piccadilly Square, how many people would recognize him? The funny
Nobody.
part would be as many people would recognize him in Great Britain as if he walked through Times Square, because there wouldn't be very many. And the same is true of Bud Crawford, as great as they both are. And I think they're great. I think they're great fighters. But they're not household names. They're not superstars. They're not usually recognizable. They need one another. They
Lou, can
needed
I
one
ask you?
another. They needed
Can
one
I
another 3 and 4 years ago. They needed each other 2 years ago. What are they doing right now? You know,
Can I
and
intervene and ask a question here, Lou? Do you know you're talking about a lot of different dynamics here, but there's one issue which I found, which I'd like you to comment on. We've had the emergence of the Zone, and previously we had HBO right in the US, and Sky Sports over in the UK has changed drastically as well. But we've seen the loss of Jim Lampley, Larry Merchant, and these commentators, and it seems now that the production value that we get on the build-ups, the production value we get on the commentators, and the entire value of boxing has completely diminished. Do you agree with that?
yes, and that
Like,
happens when any business weakens. You know, you look
yeah.
to cut costs, right? But there's another dynamic. Larry Merchant was a journalist. Larry Merchant had integrity. I didn't always agree with him. You know, he's my friend. He's still my friend. He's 91 years old and still brilliant. I'm blessed to be able to pick up the phone and still call him occasionally and shoot the breeze. Um, but whatever you thought of Larry's opinions, you knew that they came from a place of personal conviction. Um, you knew that there was, look, at one point, HBO Sports lost Mike Tyson because my then boss, Seth Abraham, and let me shout out Seth because Seth will be inducted into International Boxing Hall of Fame in a few weeks at this year's induction ceremony. But we lost Mike Tyson partially because we wouldn't fire Larry Merchant. And Seth didn't believe, and neither did our executive producer at the time, Russ Greenberg. They didn't believe that any fighter, including Tyson, including a Mayweather, should have the right to silence or affect the integrity of our broadcast. Right now, most of the commentators, and I agree with you, I think the overall quality is vastly diminished to the point of mediocrity would be, in my mind, often a compliment to much of what we have to watch, right? But you got to remember, those commentators really work now for particular factions. So your ESPN commentators are working for Top Rank and ESPN, but Top Rank basically, and Top Rank has an exclusive deal with ESPN. So there's an agenda, and there's a pressure to recognize and lift up your particular avenue of distribution. And that's the same with with the zone and Matchroom and the fights there. That's the same thing with PBC that has its own side of the street, quote unquote. And the sport is fractured, and the fracturing of the sport has made it much more difficult to present and arrange the biggest and best fights, particularly in a timely manner. Because the other thing we do to ourselves, Sham, is these fights happen long after their shelf life. You know, the expiration date is close or is past. We don't make these fights when the iron is the hottest. We wait and we wait and we wait, and eventually, when there's no choice, these big fights happen. They're not we're not striking when the iron is hot. When public demand is at its highest, we go like this to the public, and that's why we've created so many of our own problems, and because there is no overall administration and governance of the sport, promoters never get on the same page. Everything is up. All decisions are made out of greedy self-interest. No one's looking out for the long-term success of boxing as a sport. No one is out there thinking about where boxing will be in a decade or a generation. And as a result of that, boxing hasn't been in a better place in decades and generations. It's weakened itself.
So,
And
sorry, go on,
that
Lou.
saddens me. That saddens me.
I think, Lou, there's a few points here, right? Firstly, like I think that we've moved away from actually looking at professional commentators who have a good speaking ability and understanding of research and how to actually look at statistics, so on and so forth. We've moved more to getting actual ex-boxers on as commentators, and I don't think the two always translate over. I don't think you can always get an ex-boxer and make him into a commentator, so that decreases the value there of the commentating.
Yeah,
And I
I don't agree with that one though, because I disagree largely. I see your point to a degree,
Mhm.
but we've always used the X fighter as part of a team.
Yes,
Now,
yes.
and usually the third man in a guy that does blow by blow, that actually calls the action, without a color commentator, the guy that's jumping in to offer the takes on the fight, or the perceptions of where the fight's going. I think I think a fighter can be a good addition if he's talented to that kind of team, because that blow by blow guy or commentator, those guys have never stepped in a ring. So a
Mm.
fighter's offering a completely different perspective, right? I think the bigger problem is who who do they work for? What is the agenda? Is the agenda an honest appraisal? Is that what the people paying those commentators are paying them for? Or are those people paying those commentators to be homers? Are they paying those commentators to embrace, support, and advance the agenda of the promoter or the network or the distribution mechanism or the streaming service? And I would argue that that's the biggest change, that you no longer have independent sort of commentating and uh, announcing. You have agenda commentating and announcing from guys.
Biases.
Right. Well, guys who knows that people know where their bread is buttered. You know, it, too much, too much of an effort on a part of an on-air boxing commentator to be honest and fair, may be in the to his detriment. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. So, Lou, okay, we've obviously, I think we both agree that there's several problems, and I've got my opinions, you've got your opinions. I'm sure most boxing fans and promoters have their opinions to why boxing is dying, and I think a
I
large
don't think
proportion
boxing.
of
Interruption. Boxing's
okay,
not dying. Boxing will never die.
no, it won't
Same.
die, but it has, as you were
It's
stating earlier, it is going on a decline.
it's on. It's cyclically. I would argue it's on. It's in a very. First of all, it's in a. Where's the zone going to be in 5 years? I don't know. Where's Showtime in the United States? Where are they going to be 5 years from now in boxing? I don't know. Bob Arum is the powerhouse behind Top Rank Boxing, and they have an exclusive arrangement in boxing with ESPN, which is our biggest sports network in America. Bob's 93. We're in a period of sort of like I think there's going to be a lot of changes over the next decade in boxing. Where does it wind up? How does the big deal made between the guys that own UFC and WWE to combine those companies into a combat sports mega company? You know, obviously UFC is the biggest force in MMA. WWE is the biggest force in professional wrestling. I think eventually they're going to take that $20 billion company and mess around in boxing. I think that they certainly have the war chest for it. I also think they're not going to tolerate, if they get in, four different ratings organizations. They're going to create their own champions. And
But Lou, how do they, even with the finances that they got, obviously boxing is very lucrative, right? How do they step into boxing and be able to afford them absolutely humongous purses, which have gotten completely ridiculous in boxing now?
well, they know how to. I mean, I would argue that they know. I mean, how did when they took look, I'm not going to sit here and sing their praises, and I'm not saying that they're absolutely going to be able to do it. I'm going to tell you they're capitalized well enough to do it, and I can tell you that they both know enough about, like Nick Khan, who is the one of the top. Nick Khan basically runs WWE now for the McMahon family, and Nick knows a lot about boxing. Nick actually helped make the deal that between ESPN and Top Rank. And Nick knows a lot about the sport. Dana White is a big boxing fan. I know that. I know that he has various points in the past explored purchasing a promotional company or making a move into boxing. And
Zuffa
frankly,
boxing, right?
what? Excuse me.
Zuffa boxing,
Yeah,
believe it's called.
I mean, he wound up like announcing it a little bit and never really doing anything with it. But it's not that he didn't do anything with it because he's incompetent. He didn't do anything with it because he thought the system that exists in boxing right now is too broken, and he didn't want to waste the time. He had to worry about his mothership, which was UFC, right? But now, when you see a sport that is in a situation where it's so broken, someone probably could come in and make a huge difference if they can change the business model, if they can change the paradigm. I will argue to you, Sham, that having six world champions in one of way too many weight classes doesn't work. Where everyone is champ, no one is champ. Where everyone's a champ, the general public doesn't know who the champions are. Do you think that anyone, if you walk down the street and you talk to your friends who are more, soccer fans or snooker fans or darts fans that like boxing a little bit, can they tell you who the WBA champion is or the IBF champion or the WBC champion? I mean, it doesn't matter. You create your own belt. Call yourself whatever you want. I mean, if Al Heyman and PBC wanted to create the PBC championship belt, they would just be another belt. I mean, we've weakened. It used to mean so much to be heavyweight champion of the world. The heavyweight champion of the world for literally over a century, for generation after generation, was one of the most recognizable people on the face of the earth. It's not the case anymore. We have, there needs to be a boxing needs to sort of fold in to itself. There really needs to be one champion of
Okay,
each weight.
so
There
so
doesn't
so
need to be weight classes separated, by the way, by 4 pounds. I mean, I think there are too many weight classes. I think there are too many champions. I think there are too many ratings organizations. And I think when boxing goes through its next big change, someone's going to try to change the whole system, change the whole paradigm. And that's probably going to happen after my career in boxing is over. But I'm very curious to watch, and I hope I'm around to watch.
So, Lou, hopefully in the coming weeks, I'm going to have Mauricio Suleiman on this show. I would like you to ask a question and give a statement to Mauricio Suleiman around fixing the state of boxing, because he is obviously one of the most influential people in the sport who can actually fix this.
He's a dear friend of mine. He's a dear friend of mine. But the things I'm saying on this podcast, I've said to him, and I think I think the WBC tries to do the right thing, but you can't have one ratings organization trying to establish rules on PEDs, for example, and then have that ratings organization bend those rules when someone breaks them. Now, that being said, at least they're trying to do something in terms of testing and trying to turn some attention to the PED problem in boxing. The same way they do more charitable stuff and more community stuff than a lot of the other ratings organizations do. I admire a lot of what the WBC does, and I have a closer relationship to them than I do to the IBF and the WBC. I probably have a closer relationship with than I have with the other organizations. But the problems exist because of the entire system. There shouldn't be 4 different ratings organizations. How can you have 4 sets of world rankings that look as dissimilar as most of the world rankings look? Like, wouldn't you think that it would be clear? Isn't there criteria that establishes who the real contenders are, who the best in the world are? But that's not how it works. It works, the ratings organizations get sanctioning fees. Sanctioning fees are paid as percentages of fighters' purses and percentages of revenue, right? The more revenue, the higher sanctioning fee. The bigger purse for a particular fighter, the higher sanctioning fee. Okay, so there's an incentive for a Canelo Alvarez to keep winning, even if he doesn't. There's an incentive for the A side who generates the most money to. And I'm not saying people are taking envelopes of cash. They're not. But we have a system that creates and incentivizes bias. That's not healthy in a sport.
But
You know,
how do you fix this issue with the
I
different
don't
sanctioning
think it.
bodies?
I mean, if I had an easy answer, I would really try to do it. I don't like sounding like a broken record like I have for the last 25 plus years, because I've been critical of my own sport from the time I developed any really power in it. But I'm not really powerful enough to change anything. I don't have a platform, by the way. So right now, I'm really scuttling, right? I mean, I don't have an exclusive relationship with ESPN or Sky or Showtime or DAZN, right? So I mean, I have to do business with everybody, but everybody should have to do business with everybody. That's how you would have a strong sport. That's how the biggest fights and best fights would get made. What I'm about to say is going to be somewhat controversial, but I'll say it. The whole thing needs to be fucking torn down. In order to build boxing up to the best it could possibly be, the entire system as it exists presently would have to be replaced by something, and probably under a unified control, under a one governance, right? Not 4 governances or 5 governances. Not 3 promoters with 3 exclusive or 5 promoters with 5 giant exclusive television deals, dealing with 4 ratings organizations with multiple champions at every weight class with 16 or 18 or whatever the fuck weight classes, right? The system needs to change. And if the system doesn't change, we'll still exist. People will always fight for other people's entertainment. The same way people will always, whether you hate pornography or you like it, it will always exist. Whether you hate combat sports or you like them, they will always exist. People will always have sex for other people's entertainment. People will always fight for other people's entertainment. And and by the way, sex and conflict and violence are and battle are innate in human beings. They're innate in animals. They're part of who we are. They're in our DNA, right? So, as I said in my Hall of Fame induction speech, like, boxing's not dying. Stop with the boxing is dead. Boxing's not dead, and it's not going to die. But you know what? Is it going to become more and more niche? Is it going to be back room? Is it going to be two 450-pound men that needed help to get into the ring, putting on boxing gloves and fighting on a Misfits show? Um,
But that is
you
an
know,
element of it dying, isn't it? Because it's no longer it's no longer anywhere near the sport that it once was. I'm not saying it's gonna ever completely go away. Like we said, right? It goes through cycles, but it is going down, as you said, right? A long way path of decline, massively.
yeah, but there's only so far you can go down. Look, you said it earlier too. We're declining. We're doing so poorly, but in boxing, the most successful boxers are still making more money than the most successful MMA fighters.
True.
And there's still money to be made. And when a fight captures the imagination of the public, and a great boxing match is better or as good as any other sporting event on earth, I will go to my death believing that the best of boxing is as good as the best of anything. Okay,
No, no, agreed.
so
Because when you have two guys standing mano a mano with their hands, it's much
or
more
women versus
compelling. Or
or
woman versus woman, or woman versus woman, but it's got a certain appeal to it that MMA doesn't have because people are not going to
because
be as appealed to the
sport,
wrestling as
sport
they are
in
two
it,
people.
it's
Yeah,
sport in its purest sense.
yeah.
It's sport in its most base sense. And by the way, in boxing particularly, because you can only punch, there's one discipline. It's not always the greatest athlete who wins. It's not always the most talented physical specimen. There's so many intangibles. It's your mind, it's intellect, it's intelligence in the ring, it's heart, guts, balls, whatever you want to call it,
Spirit, yeah. I agree.
desire, spirit. It's the ability to pull every last bit out of what you have in yourself. And boxing is the greatest metaphor for life of any sport, because every human being is going to get knocked on their ass in their life. We are going to suffer failure. Every human being, I don't care if you're the richest man, if you're Elon Musk, I don't care who you are, everybody's going to lose somebody. You're going to get kicked in the rear end when someone you love dies. You're going to lose people in your life. You're going to deal with tragedy. You're going to deal with illness. You're going to deal with death. None of us is living forever. You're going to get knocked on your rear end. And the whole secret to living a successful, happy life is the ability to get up when you're knocked down, the ability to see that things can get better, that you have the ability to rise, and continue, and that's the metaphor that's beautiful about boxing. You get knocked down, get up until you can't get up anymore.
Lou,
Don't quit.
can I just ask on the back of that, if you don't mind? You're talking here about obviously pursuing and continuing, and we see this element of mental health taking place in nowadays, and people, obviously men have a much higher suicide rate than women do. And I saw on your Twitter, and I've heard in the past as well, that your brother tragically he committed suicide, and I would like you to please just elaborate on that, what happened, and some advice to people who are thinking about taking their own life and are struggling with mental health issues.
um Look, mental health is health. Mental health is health, and particularly among men, there's this desire to be tough, not to be able to admit that you're struggling, not to be able to seek help. Um, my brother's situation was a little bit different. Look, first of all, let me start with this. I've dealt with depression. I don't hide that. I've dealt with depression in my life. There was a period of time where I had a year in my life where I lost my brother and three of my best friends in a 16-month period. Tragically, all young. Um, I went through a hard time. I struggled with self-medicating. I struggled with depression. I went and I got help. Um, I'm not on any kind of medication now. I don't need it. I'm not in therapy right now. If I needed it, I would be. Um, my brother, my brother had issues with depression and anxiety. He was brilliant. He was good looking. I mean, but I think those anxiety and depression issues sort of ran in my family. But my brother had a very serious skiing accident and a very serious head injury. It was in a coma for over a month. He recovered from it. He still looked physically great. His intellect was still intact, but it changed his personality. It made him somewhat darker. It made him hard. It made it less possible for him to embrace help, or to find a place of peace. He tried. He was trying. When he was recovering from that skiing accident, um, he was walking on a sidewalk and someone lost control of their car and hit him while he was walking on a sidewalk. Um, it basically wrecked his leg. He while he was recovering from that, he was in a massive depression, and that's when he took his own life. Um, I know a lot of people that battle depression. I know a lot of people that battle mental illness. It's not a stigma. It's not a disgrace, and the desire, particularly, to some extent, there needs to be even more work with men because, that whole concept of be a man, suck it up. By the way, like you saw it, even Ryan Garcia goes out there and lays his problems out there for everyone to see. Which, by the way, I admire him for, and I think that's an important thing to do. I was amazed by the comments. Hey, suck it up, man. From other fighters, even from fans, whatever. Oh, come on, you're soft. You're a friggin' snowflake. You're this, you're that. No, you're not, man. It takes a lot of guts to admit you're sick. It's a lot of guts to admit you're struggling. It takes more balls and heart to admit you're struggling than it does to act like some kind of, He-Man macho monster. That's just idiocy. You know, uh, I think mental health is real important. I think the same way, I believe when you watch a fight and a guy's really getting beaten, and you can see that the guy's taking a beating, and that guy looks for a way out. I never want for the rest of my career to question that kind of decision by a fighter because there's no need for a fighter to prove to me or you, to the detriment of his health, uh, to the detriment of his brain function. A fighter, if a fighter believes I've had enough and I can't do anything more, then I'm not going to really second guess that decision. If someone tells you that they're struggling and that they're having issues with continuing to function, that they need help, take them at their word. Take them at their word. I mean, that's just human decency. You know, goes to one of the things we started our whole conversation with that had nothing to do with boxing. Um, it's important to have empathy. It's important to put yourself in the shoes of somebody else. You never know what someone else is going through.
Agreed. I think life is tough as it is, and I think as men we need to stick by each other, and I think we need to develop more of a brotherhood, and be supportive of each other rather than tearing each other down. I think that's absolutely critical. So I think you've had some really wise words there, Lou. So I appreciate that very much. And if some of our views can take that away and it helps them, and even if it just helps one person, I think that goes a long way. Um, Lou, just who are you working with at the moment? In terms of fighters, who are you working with? Who are some of your top tier fighters? I know you've worked with many in the past. Who are your current fighters that you're working with at the moment?
Well, I mean, I'm still working with George Kambosos. He's going to be. We're going to be announcing a big fight for him soon with someone. Well, I mean, it's not announced yet, but we've been working on finalizing all the details and announcing a fight with Maxi Hughes. You probably read about that. So I'm working with George still. I have a lot of young fighters. I have a lot of up and coming fighters. I'm still involved with Bakadir Jalalov, who I think is eventually going to be heavyweight champion, the big Uzbek. He just fought an amateur tournament again and won the world championship that took place in Uzbekistan. I know some people question why is a pro fighter fighting amateur, but It's actually sort of a different style of game. And also in places like Uzbekistan, where they hosted the World Championship, that tournament means a lot to the people of Uzbekistan. So that victory by Jalalov was a big deal over there. Um, I have a lot of quality fighters that I continue to work with. I got to be honest. I think to some extent, I'm right now the fighters I work with, particularly, I'm signing up some young people and young guys that
Hmm.
I believe in and I want to work with. At this stage of my career, I'm not looking to grow my company. I'm not looking to have a bigger operation. I'm looking to work with people I believe in and I really like, and I'm looking to have some fun. I no longer really feel like I have to fucking prove anything to anybody in boxing. I think I've done this for 33 years. I've been at the top of the industry for a long, long time. I'm a little bit tired. You didn't mention this, but I run two minor league baseball teams. The
Oh
San
yeah,
Francisco
yeah.
Giants AA team
Hmm.
in Richmond, Virginia, the Richmond Flying Squirrels, and the Tampa Rays AA team um, in uh, in Montgomery, Alabama, in baseball. So I run those two businesses also. So I have a lot on my plate. Um, I'm sort of in a stage in boxing that I want to enjoy the last stages of my career. I'm not going to be Bob Arum. I'm not going to be doing this at 93. I'm not going to be Don King having a press conference with a fighter at 92. I promise you, I ain't going to be doing boxing then. Um, but I still love the sport. I still want to be part of a resurgence of the sport, and I'm really hoping that we find a way to work together to institute the kind of changes that need to be made. Unfortunately, as I pointed out earlier, I tend to think the whole system needs to be brought down and the whole business paradigm of the sport needs to be rewritten.
Lou, on that, I hope that you are successful in all your endeavors. You have been at the pinnacle of the sport for many, many years, and I wish you nothing but the best. Hopefully, we can have some of your fighters on the channel as well. I don't know, can you get George Kambosos to appear on the channel? That would be fantastic. And I'm sure we'll talk again in the future as well.
We could definitely arrange that, and it was good talking to you. And by the way, we started off on a strange tangent, but I enjoyed this conversation, Cham. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lou. All the best, and I'll speak to you soon.